Hello team! Welcome back to my third race review for the Australian Grand Prix. This race was the first race ever with 3 red flags, and the last few laps were pretty crazy. So let's get into the start of the race. The lights went out, we saw George and Lewis both getting past Max. We saw Leclerc trying to get past a few drivers, and he gets tagged by Stroll and ends up out of the race. It was an unfortunate one for Leclerc, but for me it was a racing incident. Stroll had nowhere to go. He had Alonso on his inside, Leclerc going around him on the outside. So, an unfortunate incident for him. Then with George and Lewis both getting past Max, George was looking good. He was flying off into the distance. Lewis was just keeping in DRS range, and Max seems to be struggling to get past Lewis, whilst Lewis still had DRS. But then we saw Albon crash, and that was a disaster for him. This is a really good track for Williams. He was, I think he was running in about P6. He seems to be on the pace with everyone, and he just loses control, puts it in the wall, loses his front wing, and is out of the race. George pits under the safety car, but then gets screwed by a red flag. And we're set for a restart with George down in 7th, and now Lewis leading the race with Max right behind him. This time, however, Lewis can do absolutely nothing. He doesn't have DRS, but Max does. And Max absolutely breezes straight past him. Simple as you like. Meanwhile, further back, George trying to make a bit of progress, and then his car sets on fire and he DNFs. So a real shame, because it was looking like a really good race for George. Then you sort of have a long period where nothing too much happens. It looks like it's going to be a standard Verstappen win, although he does have one moment in the penultimate corner where he runs wide. That could have been a lot more interesting if he'd have crashed there, but alas, nothing happens until lap 55, where K-Mag decides to drive into the wall and loses his wheel, which causes another red flag. So lap 57, we get our third standing start of the race. Most people get through it pretty safely, but when you're this late on in the race and you're having a standing start, it was always going to be chaos. I think they should have done a rolling restart behind the safety car. With one lap left, everyone's just going to be sending it, trying to get into those points positions, and that's what we saw happen. And we saw Sainz hitting Alonso and getting a penalty. We saw Gasly going off track and coming back on into the path of Ocon and wiping him out. And further back, we saw Logan Sargent deciding to use Nick de Vries as his brakes and sending them both out of the race. I thought they were very inconsistent with their penalties, with Sainz being the only one to get a penalty. For me, both Gasly and Sargent should be getting grid penalties in Baku, but maybe the FIA will still look into that nearer the time, who knows, but it doesn't seem like they're going to. And I've got to say, you've got to feel bad for Sainz. That penalty, he had no time left to undo the damage from it, and it took him from P4 all the way out of the points to P12. And when you listen to his radio, he was practically crying in the car. I really did feel bad for him. So after another red flag there was a lot of debate over what the starting order should be for the next restart, which they ended up just doing a lap behind the safety car to take the checkered flag. But teams like Haas wanted it to be the order that they crossed safety car line 2 at, which would have meant Hülkenberg got his first podium, and that would have been truly incredible. But their protest about it after the race was rejected. So still great points for Hülkenberg, finishing I think 7th in the end. And Tsunoda picked up his first points, avoiding that record that the commentators kept going on about. I think it would have been the most times finishing in the same position other than being first. It would have been his 4th time finishing 11th in a row, but for Carlos Sainz's penalty. And McLaren get their first points of the season, and Oscar gets the first points of his career at his home race. A great day for McLaren. Now let's take a look at my driver ratings. The biasy hat has been changed, because for me, Lewis Hamilton gets an S. great race from him, and you couldn't really ask for much more from Max, so he's also getting an S. Russell had a very good race, but I've put him in the NA section because he didn't make it to the end through no fault of his own, but he could have been on for a race win until that point. Sainz and Gasly were two ones that I really wasn't sure about, because Gasly was having a really good race, running in P5, seemed to be on pace with the cars in front of him for such a long time, but then that incident at the end, wiping out his teammate, just completely ruined it for him. Same thing with Sainz, he ran an okay race, and then the penalty he gets at the end kind of drops him down and he has no chance to do anything about it. Let me know what you think about these ratings, and if there's any drivers that you think I've got massively wrong here, and we could debate it in the comments. So elsewhere in Australia, we saw Formula 2, and the feature race is a great race from Haas. Absolutely dominated that one, and I also just want to give a shout out to Dennis Hauger. He won the sprint race, and then in the feature race he was looking on for a P3, and then he gets wiped out behind the safety car by the guy behind him. I'm supporting Hauger this year, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but I was devastated for him. Okay guys, that's all from me. We've got a big wait now until Baku, but hopefully that's going to be a good race. The first sprint race of the season. Looking forward to it. Like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on TikTok. Go support me in the comments. I've been getting a lot of hate on my TikToks recently. I believe in you guys. Love you all, and goodbye.